Ryan Egan, his first year as the head coach of the Coulee Region Chill, and it's kind of warm out, but hockey is underway. And Ryan, thanks for coming on. We get him in studio here today, and this always jumps out to me when you guys start your season in Blaine, Minnesota. It's kind of like 80 degrees out, and it doesn't feel like hockey, and bam, it's just here. And you guys went 2-2 on the trip. So your first year as the Chill head coach, what's your take on that first trip in Blaine? You know, you won a couple, but almost more importantly than that, you get a chance to get on the road and really spend some time with your guys.
Yeah, no, both sides of that are positive for us. We're heading to the showcase. We're trying to find an identity. We're trying to figure out, which pieces are going to be the right pieces for our puzzle kind of moving forward. And playing 4 games in 4 days, there's no better atmosphere than to do that than to put the guys out there and let them play a bunch of games and see where things fit and see how the personalities are, see how guys react to certain situations. And then, yeah, for me, getting to know the guys, spending time in the hotel and on the bus and things like that helps too.
Now, essentially, these are the best junior hockey players, 15 to 20 years old. The Chiller Tier 2 junior hockey, so there's one tier above it. But you've got some of the very best junior hockey players in the world. I mean, it's not just Upper Midwest. It's not just the United States. You guys have players from all over the world who are looking to get Division I. If they're teenagers, go Division I hockey in some cases. Maybe get drafted by an NHL team eventually. That's the goal for just about every one of these guys. But I imagine this is pretty challenging. Forgetting about the on-ice part of it, you're on the bus. You've got 25 teenagers, essentially, a couple guys in their very early 20s. In some cases, they don't even know each other yet. What is that dynamic like? You get on a bus. It's still September. It's the very, very beginning of hockey season, and off and running. What is that like as a head coach? I imagine that's one of the biggest challenges.
It is one of the biggest challenges. We're trying to get to know the guys, but it's interesting because when you do throw 23 to 25 different personalities in a small space, it is interesting what happens, and kind of who does what and who's the vocal guy and who's the guy that hides in the back of the bus and who's the guy that's in coach's ear on the trip wanting this and wanting that. And,
so what do they want? When a guy who's in coach's ear starts yapping, what does he usually want?
It's a time for guys that, during the week it's busy, right? So the phone is ringing, we're planning for practice, the guys are preparing. So the bus is kind of that time where we can have some one-on-one time. We can call guys up, and I think they know that too. So you'll get some guys that'll come up and just want to chat, right? They're all concerned about their futures. They're concerned about the outcomes. They're concerned about what schools are liking them and what schools are talking to us about them. So there's a lot of things. These kids have a lot of pressures on them, and they have a lot of things going through their head.
As somebody who's covered minor league sports a lot, I always feel like on those first couple trips when they start teasing each other, that's kind of when you're almost there, right? I mean, it's kind of a subtle thing, but now they know each other enough, and this guy's jumping on this guy, and they start getting on each other a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely had some of that on the trip, and I will say that we started the showcase with a win, which was nice, and we finished with a win. So driving back after winning a hockey game, that 2.5 hours on the bus was a lot of fun. Makes the trips a lot more fun. The guys have more fun on the way back. They're more vocal rather than it being a pretty quiet down bus. So it was a fun trip and a successful trip overall.
Ryan Egan is the head coach for the Coulee Region Chill. Would you get him in studio here today? As the first-year coach of this team, now you've been a head coach before at the junior hockey level, and you were an assistant at St. Mary's. You've done this for a while now. What has this transition been like for you? It's a lot different getting on that bus at this level of hockey, and you're not one of the guys on the side. You're the guy at the front of the bus if something goes wrong, if something non-hockey related happens, but also just kind of setting that tone of leadership, on that very first trip. What was that like for you?
Every year, whether I'm new or not new, is a new experience with a group of guys.
Yeah.
New group of guys, and trying to set the tone, like you said, and trying to build that respect and trying to build that the camaraderie and making sure that, the big thing we talk about is trust, making sure you're saying the right things, making sure you're building trust with them, and they're building trust with me. So that's been something we've been working towards. But it's every year is a different group of personalities. It's different. So I wouldn't say that the change in level has been different as far as that's concerned, but it's been interesting, and I'm looking forward to see how things turn out here moving forward.
When you look at the dynamic, the cultural dynamic of bringing all these guys together again, we were talking off the air, your first-round pick this year, and again, In junior hockey, it's actually a draft, how you acquire your players, and everybody's eligible as long as they're between 15 and 20 years old, and they're good enough hockey players. They're all eligible. You drafted a kid, Arturas Pavlikov, I think I said that right, from Lithuania.
Yeah.
So you're talking about kids from Europe. You're talking about kids from Minnesota. You're talking about kids from the West Coast, the East Coast. Do you notice things there when you're on these trips and eating meals and practice, and when you're up in Blaine, for example, spending 4 or 5 days with these guys? I imagine there's some humor in there too, where these guys start to come together, and the one guy can barely speak English, where he kind of can, but it's the broken English, and then you get a kid from a different part of the country that's completely different than the Midwestern kids. What is that part of it like?
It's interesting. For example, we took the guys to Chipotle for a meal, and we have another player. We have the goaltender from Lithuania, and we have a forward from the Czech Republic.
Okay.
And his name is Lucas, and Lucas had never had Mexican food before. So that was interesting, right? So he's asking the guys, what should I get? What should I eat? He was nervous. I could tell he didn't know if he was going to like it. You know how hungry the kids are, and then he takes his first bite and his eyes get all big, and he's like, wow, this is pretty darn good. So
it worked out pretty well.
It worked out pretty well. But yeah, you get some humor in it too, just because of the difference in culture, the food. The guys do razz them a bit, and they give it back. So it is an interesting dynamic for sure.
There's nothing like those jokes back and forth with the different accents and the different dialects, and they start going. Or there's always and I know I've experienced this too with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. They teach each other their languages. Now, some of the words are teaching each other are a little bit questionable sometimes, but they got to start teaching each other the words, and they go back and forth, and it can be a lot of fun too. And
it can
get a lot of humor, which I imagine is a good thing.
It is a good thing, and it's been a good thing to this point. The guys have kind of developed into the group really well, and they've taken them in, and it's been a positive thing, and it's nice to have some culture in the room too.
Ryan Egan joining us. He's the head coach for the Coulee Region Chill. They just wrapped up their opening showcase event in Blaine, Minnesota, went 2-2 on the trip. Now, you're talking about 25 guys that are all mostly players that come from wherever they come from, and they were the best player or one of the best players where they came from. And that's another challenge at this level. And I want to ask you about setting up your lines and that kind of a thing. I imagine that's not easy in week 1, week 2, because you don't know, who works well together. Obviously, you want to have your best players on your first line, but sometimes you want to balance it a little bit too. What's your philosophy as a head coach in terms of meshing all that together the first couple of weeks?
The first couple of weeks, we don't go first line, second line, third line, fourth line.
It's impossible, isn't it?
We do a lot of different variations. We want to see a lot of different combinations. We want to see player X play with player Y. We want to give everyone an opportunity to see where they fit. Some guys are willing to do certain things that other guys aren't willing to do, and some guys are better in certain situations than other guys
What's
are.
an example of not being willing to do something or willing to do something?
Some guys just have it ingrained in their personalities and the way they do things. For example, one of the toughest things in hockey is to commit to blocking a shot. Nobody wants people to think about standing in front of a black piece of rubber at 90 to 100 miles an hour. It takes a special person to want to do that,
Sure.
whether you want to have equipment on or not. Some guys are just more willing to do that than others. Some are just more talented and are able to score. Some are more complementary to guys that are able to score. And throughout the first few weeks, and we have a pretty good idea where things are at, but we want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity to see how they fit and where they fit.
Ryan Egan joining us. He is the head coach for the Coulee Region Chill. We've got him in studio today to talk some hockey. When you look at the talent level in this league, and I know to you, Ryan, this is kind of like 2 + 2, but to the casual listener right now that maybe makes it out to a Chill game once in a while, or they haven't been to one yet and they're thinking about it, what kind of talent are we looking at here? I mean, I know probably a third of your players could certainly play Division I hockey. The other 2/3 are close, and they're going to play somewhere else. There are some of these kids that will play professionally, and maybe 2 or 3 that may play in the NHL one day. But give me, how right am I in kind of breaking that down? Give me an idea, give our listeners an idea of the talent level and where some of these guys realistically will end up.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nose as far as, we're hopeful that at least a third, if not more, will end up with a Division I scholarship of some sort. And then we have some younger players on the team that will work towards that over the next couple years. But if we finished every year with a third of our team ending up at the Division I college hockey level, we'd be happy with that. In North America and Utah, you hit a little bit with it on the Europeans and players from other countries wanting to come to America. the college hockey is what drives junior hockey. So all these players want to play college hockey, and that's where these athletes from overseas want to come, because we have taken in North America hockey and created another level with collegiate hockey, with the professional hockey that we have here in this country. So it's realistic that a few of these guys may play after college. Right now, these athletes, their goal is to just get to that college level and have that opportunity to play at the Division I level. But we will have some players that will end up playing Division III hockey for sure, which is another great level of hockey. But the talent is good. They're very eager young men. They work extremely hard. They're very driven, goal-oriented, and they know what the outcome is that they want out of this experience.
You know, you bring up the different levels of college hockey, and I think Joe sports fan says, oh, Division III, and you think Division III football, basketball, but it's a little bit different in hockey in that most universities don't have a hockey team. So Division III hockey is a lot different than Division III for the most part in other sports, isn't it? It's a very, very high level.
Yeah, most sports, basketball and some other sports, there's a Division I, Division II, Division III. In hockey, there's Division I and there's Division III. There's a very small Division II conference that has their own championship out in the East Coast, but there's very, very little Division II. So the numbers are just shrunk because you've got a large pool and there's just not as many college hockey opportunities, which makes college hockey at all levels extremely competitive.
Ryan Egan is the head coach for the Coulee Region Chill, joining us in studio today. Tyler Ebner was one of the best hockey players at the high school level in the state of Wisconsin at Onalaska High School. He made a name for himself here. You've got him on your team this year. What are your first impressions of Tyler and how good he can eventually be?
Boy, I had the opportunity to have Tyler play with me with the Freeze for a very short period of time a couple years ago, when he was just tier 3.
Hockey, yep.
He was a sophomore in high school at the time. Saw a lot of potential in his game. Have followed his career over the last few years. He was a player that over the showcase we had an idea what to expect from him, but from game 1, 2, 3, and then into game 4, he played a pretty large role in game 4, and that was exciting for us. We ended up winning that game, and when he plays a role like that, now expectations have gotten even higher for him. So we expect him to play a role in a lot of different situations. We expect him to be successful in those situations as well.
What about, Ryan, some of the other local guys on the team? In fact, West Salem has had some pretty good players that have been produced, and you've got a couple of them, Bailey Martin, Taylor Trapp, Marshall Plunkett's on the team as well, too. So you got 3 of them right now from West Salem. What's your take on that group? And I guess chop them up a little bit. They're all different, but what are your impressions of those 3 guys?
All 3 extremely talented. So Taylor's been with me with the Freeze for 2 years. He'll be a 20-year-old this year, so he knows me well and I know him well. Bailey Martin was another high-end high school athlete last year that played for West Salem that I've had the benefit of coaching this last summer. And then Marshall Plunkett, actually, as a 98 birth year, and he's a senior in high school this year, played last year for the league champion in our league, which is in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Sure.
So we were fortunate enough to pick him up in a trade over the summer and bring him back home where he can finish high school here and live at home. And he adds a ton to our back end and our D-core. And we're excited about all 3 of them. We'll see how much they contribute moving forward, but we're excited to have that group of local kids. That's part of the reason for this organization, is to make sure that we not only build youth hockey and build hockey in the area, but to give these local kids an opportunity someday, hopefully.
Ryan Egan, the head coach for the Coulee Region Chill, joining us in studio. Can it be a challenge to have local guys? There's that pressure of, why isn't this kid playing? We came here to see him. How come I won't name any of the kids because they're all different, but how come our local guys not playing? That is a challenge for you, isn't it?
It is, and when you start talking about the media, the local media is interested in those local players, right? They want to know how they're doing, and they want to keep tabs on them. So yeah, it is. So it's important up front that we make decisions based on how we think and how successful they're going to be, to make sure that they have every opportunity to be successful for us.
You've got some other players. Alex Falconer is one that jumps out. It's early, so we'll see how these players end up being. But Isaac Tyson's another one. You've got some real scorers on this team, don't you?
Well, we'd like to think so.
Potentially.
They've both had success at this level. They're both veteran players within this league. We're just hoping we can find the right mix for both of them to allow them to be as successful as possible. Because realistically, if those 2 athletes, along with a few others, if they're successful and put up good numbers, that's going to lead to success for us and more wins.
All right, we're talking with Ryan Egan, the head coach for the Coulee Region Chill. You want to hang out for another segment?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll take a break. Ryan Egan, we'll talk some hockey when we come back on the Sports Lead.
You're listening to The Sports Lead with John Poppadopoulous.
Chris Goodell, Loggers General Manager, going to join us a little bit later on in the 5 o'clock hour. Some college football today, kind of a baseball Tuesday as well. It's kind of one of those tweener days, but right now we're talking some hockey. The head coach for the Cooley Region Chill, Ryan Egan, and before we get back to Ryan, I want to let you guys know, maybe I'll let Ryan know this too. Rose Jewelers, it's football season, and are you married, Ryan?
I am, yes.
All right, so you know the deal, right? If you're away at night, you're doing games and stuff. Rose Jewelers, I'm telling you right now. Head downtown to Rose Jewelers. Not a bad time of year to bring a gift home. Maybe you can tell our listeners, right? Our young guys out there listening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Great time of year.
I'm going to get him in trouble. I can say this already. I know how this works too. You grew up in the Twin Cities, and
Correct.
You played hockey. You had a really good career growing up as a prep player. Ended up playing college hockey as well, and you've made lacrosse your home now.
Yeah.
After growing up in the Twin Cities, now you're the head coach of the Cooley Region Chill. A lot of guys in that position. Some will go back and forth. How come you decided to kind of settle in here and live here year-round?
Well, hockey's brought my family, my wife and I, to a number of different states. We were in Nebraska for a little bit. We were in Texas for a little bit. And then we ended up taking the job at St. Mary's University, so we're there for 5 years. And while we were there, my wife ended up taking a job with a great company in La Crosse, and it just made sense when this opportunity to start the Freeze program a few years ago came about. It made sense to relocate here to the La Crosse area.
Now, the Freeze, again, Tier 3 hockey, it's a level below the Chill, and they
Correct.
play in lacrosse as well, so you kind of worked your way up a little bit. Now, when you look at hockey in this area, I know without question it's not at the same level as what you grew up with in the Twin Cities. It's not Minnesota hockey, but it has gotten better. As somebody who's covered it over the years, we've seen some programs, the Onalaska program, Onalaska High School, both boys and girls in particular, actually, have had some success. If you go back a decade, for a while, Sparta was very good, Toma was very good. We've seen some other programs kind of bubble up a little bit. What's your take on where hockey is in the Cooley region as someone who now lives here, but who grew up playing in the Twin Cities and played collegiately? How close is this area to getting to where the Twin Cities is in terms of the level of play and the passion for it?
Well, I think what you've had over the years is you've had a number of good players and talented players that have played at a high level. Numbers of players is something that we're going to continue to work towards. It's something I hope to be a part of in my time here. I've got 5 and 8-year-old sons. One just turned 5. So I'm a part of that youth hockey process right now. So we want to continue to market youth hockey. We want to continue to grow numbers and build all the programs in the area right now. But I think like I said before, what you've found is there's been some very good, talented hockey players, and there are some very good, talented hockey players in the area right now. But, as a whole, each individual association has their own battles that they're trying to fight with, whether they have their own rink or don't have their own rink in town and things like that. But I think things are heading in the right direction, and I'm happy to be a part of that process now.
Ryan, what about your relationships with the high schools? We talked about Tim Ebner before, or Tim's the head coach there, but Tyler, his son, plays for you, but Tim has been the head coach there for many years. How important is it for you as the head coach of the Chill to develop relationships with the high school coaches? Not necessarily because you're going to have a ton of players that will end up, although you've had a healthy amount, but to build up that camaraderie, to get those teams and those kids and their families out to the games, and maybe every once in a while you get a player who's good enough to play for you. How important is that, and how much of that have you done?
I think it's extremely important. I think those relationships benefit in a lot of different ways, and some of those you just mentioned. One is just to be a part of the development process and be available to them if there's anything I can help them out with. My assistant coach, Alex North, is actually the head high school coach for the La Crosse Central high school team as well. So, it's definitely a community when you start talking about hockey in the area. It's definitely something that I look forward to continue to work towards and building those relationships. With our situation at the rink at Green Island, we want to continue to have every opportunity for those coaches to bring their teams in and whatever way we can for 12 months throughout the year, to make sure that there's availability there and we continue to build those relationships. But we've been working towards those relationships, and they're growing with every community, and we look forward to continuing to work towards those. We're
talking with Ryan Egan. He is the head coach for the Cooley Region Chill. You mentioned before, we talked about your career. You played at River Falls after playing high school hockey in Minnesota. You've coached at the high school level. You were an assistant at St. Mary's, like you talked about. You've really kind of grinded your way up the ladder. You were with the Freeze, Tier 3 hockey, the lowest level of junior hockey. Now you're the head coach for a Tier 2 team, the Chill. So you're not one of these guys who's handed it on a silver platter, but you've moved up every couple of years. What are your goals long term? I know the goal this year is to try and win a championship with the Chill, but looking down the road, do you see yourself as a college head coach professionally? What's the goal for you personally, hockey related?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of the path in coaching, I've been very fortunate in the places I've had, and I've had opportunities to be a little choosy because I've had some options throughout my career. This is a great opportunity to be at this level, so I'm extremely grateful. But I think if I were to look forward, I think the end goal for me would be to be a college head coach at whichever level. I see that being a good fit, having been at the college level for 5 years. They're great jobs. They're stable jobs. And I think working with student athletes is something that I look forward to down the road.
Now, as far as the Chill this year, it is really, really early. I mean, we're 4 games in. You've got your home opener on October 22nd. You got Austin coming in, so a little over a month from now. But upside of this team is what, in your opinion, based on what you see?
Upside right now is experience. We have a good number of veteran players that have played in the league and have experience in the league, and that's our upside right now. I mean, our success is going to be driven by those athletes and their experience, and expectations are high for those players, and I think they have high expectations for themselves. So we're looking forward to see where we're at in a month from now or 2 months from now, but I think that experience should bode well for us.
Well, Ryan, we appreciate the time coming in. It's been fun. I mean, it kind of flies by, doesn't it?
It does.
Just got in here, but let's do this again. If you'd like to come in via phone, we should definitely do this again. Good luck. I know you got your season coming up here, the kickoff in Blaine, and now you have some practices to go, and then you get going. But thank you so much for coming in and coming again. We'd love to have you here.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Ryan Egan, the head coach for the Cooley Region Chill.